Everyone, this is Dan doing another video. My last video got pretty good reviews, so I'm going to do this one kind of in the same mold. Last video was about squeeze pots, and this time I thought I'd talk about situations where you're facing the possibility of multiple barrels from an opponent, because I think this is definitely a problem area for a lot of players. They're just not necessarily sure how to react to or the thought process behind what they should be thinking about on the turn, say, when they're facing a bet with the possibility of facing a river bet as well. I do think that most people are aware of the term reverse implied odds, but they might not really know how to apply it or what it really means. So we'll kind of go through a couple of hands, and I'll try and point out some things to think about, what to factor in when deciding if calling the turn is going to be profitable with the prospect of possibly facing a sizable river bet. So our first hand, real quick, is we got Jack Jack, and we're up against a relative unknown. 85 hands on him. He seems to be rather tight, 2013 player. So that type of player is kind of, you imagine it to be like your weaker rig, maybe your recreational player, your Don Cheadle type player on full tilt who just doesn't really know what they're doing, but they like playing. So he's gonna have a pretty tight range there. From first position, you gotta expect that they're raising most pairs and the high cards, but they're not gonna be raising stuff like generally like 10-7 suited, the Aaron Jones type hands. So anyway, I face a raise. So with jacks, versus a lot of players, I would 3-bet. We're 5-handed. It's a pretty good hand. But versus a tighter player, I think flatting is probably best. I just don't want to fold out a lot of hands I beat, and I feel like if I do, get all in with jacks here pre-flop, most of the time I'm gonna be a pretty sizable dog. So that's the case. The flop 963, pretty good for me. Even versus a tight range, there's still a lot of things I'm ahead of. I've got very good equity here. Really, it's not even really worth going over in poker so just because he's betting enough hands here, like 5-7s, 8s, 2s, ace queen. He's betting a bunch of hands, and I've got very good equity versus that. So, I could check raise, but again, I don't really want to shut out those worse hands. I think calling and just seeing what happens on the turn is probably the best move. So queen of spades on the turn. This is kind of where it begins to get a tad bit tricky, just because a lot of the stuff he's c-betting, the queen helps him a decent amount because a lot of times he's got ace queen, queen king, those type of hands. So when he does bet the turn, it begins kind of the decision-making process, deciding whether a turn call is profitable, and I think a turn check raise is out of the question. There's really just no merit, I think, in turning my hand into a bluff here. So on the turn, what hands can I expect him to have? Well, certainly he's going to be betting his sets again, and I expect him probably to bet, if he hits a queen on the turn, and he can have like queen jack suited, queen 10 suited. If he hits those, he's probably going to bet it because he hits top pair and he's going to be pretty happy. He can also double barrel this turn because it's somewhat of a scare card. So if I've got pocket sevens, he might be betting like ace jack, ace 10 suited, those type of hands where he's hoping to get me to fold the medium pocket pair. That being the case, I also don't think, I'd say most players here are going to be pretty happy checking down 8, 7, 6s, 5s, 2s, 10s, jacks. Especially the average type player, they're just not, if they have a pair and a scare card hits, they're not necessarily trying to bluff it. Most of the time they're just happy getting the showdown because they're also scared of it. So if that's his range, I've got about 38% equity, and that does include ace jack, ace king, a good amount of bluffs. So if you say take out ace jack offsuit, maybe one of those hands, either ace king or ace jack, he's checking it back. If that's the case, then we go down from around 38% to 34% equity. So I would say on average, I can expect to have roughly 35%. It's a good estimate. I think it's reasonable. So if that's the case, facing a bet of $70, which puts 172 total in the pot, it's 70 to call. Pot odds of 29%, I've got 35% equity. Clearly, if the hand ends here, it's a clear-cut call, roughly a plus $15 decision on the turn. This turn call nets me $15 more than if I would get by folding. So, if we're done here, if he's either all in or just we know he's just not going to bet the river ever, then we know it's a plus EV call. But how do we proceed if he has more left and he's likely to bet the river some percentage of the time? That's where I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what to do. I think many players, and myself included, in the past, I'll be like, okay, the turn decision is plus EV, I'm going to call, and then we'll just go see a river. So here, complete blind kits on the river. Like if I'm ahead on the turn, I'm ahead on the river. So I got to be somewhat happy with my hand. Some percentage of the time, he's going to check, and I do have a good amount of showdown value. But some percentage of the time, he's going to bet as well, and I'm going to be faced with a decision. So, let's say, go through the actual hand. He actually does bet. Fairly sizable bet, 185. It's like 75, a little more than 3/4 a pot. Now, what hands can I expect him to be barreling this river with? Well, it's a large river bet, so I think a lot of times, especially your quote-unquote average player, isn't going to be looking to value bet that light with a bet size that large. So let's say he's just not value betting Queen Jack and Queen 10 here. He's value betting Queen King plus, and maybe he's not really going to be bluffing all that much. He might be happy checking back Ace King. He's got maybe some showdown value with those hands, so he's just going to give up. I called twice, so it's apparent I have some type of hand. And so maybe he just gives up and decides to check back his ace high hands. But continues to fire king high and jack 10 suited, hoping again to get me to fold. Maybe if I somehow have ace jack here, or I have pocket 7 or something, he's trying to get me to fold those hands. So on a 3 of hearts river, now I've got pretty crappy equity. Roughly 15% equity, depending on his bluff frequencies. Maybe if he's firing ace king again, anywhere up to 30% equity. But I would say a lot of times if someone has like ace king or something, they're just gonna be pretty happy checking it down. So I'd probably expect somewhere in the ballpark of being ahead here, maybe 20% of the time. That being the case, I'm facing a rather sizable river bet. I need 30% equity to call. So it's a pretty easy fold. I don't have a pot odds, so I fold here. And I think people have been told a lot of times, anytime you fold, it's a 0 EV play. So what people will think is like, okay, I made a plus $15 decision on the turn. On the river, my decision is 0 EV. And I'm just going to fold the river, and I clearly made money because I made a plus EV decision on the turn, a neutral EV decision on the river. Clearly my play has to be plus EV overall. That's not really a good way to think about it, and we'll go into that. We'll actually go and kind of think about the other situation that might occur would be is this guy continues to bluff. Let's say he's a real aggressive player. He's going to value bet light. He's also going to basically fire 100% of his range on the turn. He's going to fire it again on the river, both as bluffs and for value. If that's the case, then now we've got about 37% equity. So we're doing not great. We're still less than 50%, but now we have 37% equity. So we have to